Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Cabinet on Monday, the 17th of March. And thank you for everybody being able to accommodate our Monday meeting. And I'll explain why when I get to these announcements and the leaders' comments. I'm going to go straight into the agenda. Apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Leader. I can offer apologies for absence this morning from Councillor Gina Placey, the portfolio holder for partnerships, and from Councillor Paul Honeywood, leader of the Conservative Group.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ford, and that's noted. So, item 2, minutes of the last meeting. I have them in front of me. I hope you've all had a good chance to read them. I'm happy to move them. I do need a seconder.
I'm happy to second, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And do I have any questions or anything around them, or are we in agreement? Agreed. Okay, I'll get them signed in a second. Agenda item number 3, any declarations of interest on today's agenda? Nope. Okay. Number 4 is announcements by the Leader of the Council. As I mentioned earlier, we've had to move the Cabinet from the usual Friday meeting to Monday because myself, the Chief Exec, the Opposition Leader and Deputy Leader, and my Vice Deputy Leader went to the DCN conference. As it might be expected, it was very much about LGR and devolution, and we got to sit and listen to and talk to the Minister, Jim McMahon, about what that might mean for us. And it was very enlightening, and there was a lot of things that we learned from that. It also gave us an opportunity to talk to other leaders about their LGR experiences that are already gone on. And so, for the whole, a very worthwhile meeting. So that's my only comments. Number 5 is announcements by Cabinet members. There are none today. And therefore, going on to number 6, matters referred to the Cabinet by the Council. There are none. And then number 7, matters referred to the Cabinet by a committee, reference from Standards Committee, the revised planning protocol. So I'm happy to move this. And firstly, I'd like to thank the Standards Committee for the great work they did on this. It's been a long time coming, and I'm glad to see that it's here and being delivered. I noticed that it was there was a consultation, and it was with officers, members, including our own portfolio holder. And I really wasn't going to go over the report much more than that, as it covers it in very, very adequately. And so I'm happy to move it, but I do need a seconder. Councillor Bacon.
Quite happy to second, Chair, and I concur with your comments about the Standards Committee for taking their time and looking at this.
Thank you very much. So it's been moved and seconded. Do we have any questions? Councillor Bray.
Was planning, so you knew it'd be me. Yeah, I've read this a couple of times actually, through and through, and I think most of what's in there works very, very well, and they've done a really good job. I'm always concerned when we introduce new rules for what is a quasi-judicial committee, and it is, of course. So the planning committee effectively works like a court. It's not like other committees. It makes decisions that are legally binding, etc., etc. And I'm always concerned at anything that fetters the planning committee's ability to make decisions. So I've looked at it quite hard. Couldn't agree more. It needs to be respectful, and on occasions I've been present when it's been slightly less than that. I think I can raise my head above the parapet and say that I've never been disrespectful, but on occasions it does degenerate, and that's because it's quite passionate. And I think there needs to be a solid understanding, I think there is with most councillors, that planning decisions affect people and people get quite passionate about them. As councillors, we represent the people's view, which is quite difficult because it can sometimes be different to the legal view, and the legal view presides. So it is quite hard. So I'm concerned a little bit on that. The other point I think I wanted to raise is that we recently had a meeting of council of group leaders to deal with the Widdicombe situation of cabinet members, and it was actually quite a struggle for some groups, particularly the largest group on the council, to find members to fill planning committee positions. It's an onerous task. I mean, we're talking about a full day every month. It's quite difficult. You will be hated by a number of people in the room at a planning committee. That is always whichever decision you make, it's unavoidable. It's very onerous, and the training issue is quite onerous. I appreciate we need training, but the emphasis on training is quite difficult. Here we're making it clear that those who haven't been trained can't sit on the planning committee, and I accept that. But I am concerned that as time goes by, with the difficulty finding people who are prepared to make that commitment and take on that responsibility, we may struggle, if we're too onerous with it, to find people who are prepared to do it. And that is a concern. We spotted that at the Widdicombe recently. So I think it's very, very important, and it is mentioned in here, that committee members must be able to ask robust questions of officers. Now, you can do that respectfully, they do. So it can be done in a way that isn't disrespectful. And I would point out that if councillors simply follow the recommendation of officers, then there's no real point in having a committee. We could all vote by post. So we do need to be quite robust about what we're doing and making sure that we get it right. So that concerns me a little bit. We must remember that the decision is made by the planning committee. One of my pet things, and I think a few people are aware of this, but I've always had a serious issue with the idea that officers need to make a recommendation on individual applications. I don't believe they should, and I actually believe it is almost predetermined in the committee, because particularly if you have new and inexperienced members, if they're looking at a document like this one, which is what they have in front of them, that says your officers recommend that you take this decision, I think that for inexperienced councillors will make that decision, and that I see as borderline predetermination. I've always taken the view that our officers are really important. We need advice. It's absolutely crucial. We are not experts, and we are not supposed to be. We are lay members, much magistrates. And I liken it to magistrates. It is the case that the magistrate relies heavily on their clerk in a court, but the clerk will never tell the magistrate whether to find the guy guilty or not. And I liken that to a recommendation from officers. I would prefer we lived in a world where officers gave all the facts and actually said, you can't do this because it's illegal. That's fine, and no problem with that. But I'm not sure that they need to say, we recommend you approve or we recommend you refuse, because I think that's leading, I think it's borderline predetermination. We have many, many cases, just to be clear, where it is quite balanced. So I sat on planning committee, people all know that. So the decision could go either way, and officers will say so. And I think it's unfair on officers that they then have to make a recommendation one way or the other, when in actual fact they're not absolutely sure which recommendation they want to make. We had one very recently with the officer that quite clearly this is really balanced, and I've recommended this way, but I could easily have recommended the other. Why was he put in a position where he had to make a recommendation? So I think, whilst I welcome quite a lot of what I'm seeing in front of me, there were a couple more bits that maybe could have been done, and I have had these discussions with the monitoring officer. We don't, it's fair to say, necessarily agree, but I think it is an issue. Most importantly, the planning committee needs to operate as a quasi-judicial committee, and as such, it is the decision maker. It's the committee's fault if it all goes wrong. They take the can. And I'm not sure that any kind of fettering of any sort is due. And I think this goes some way to prevent that, and I will be clear that I don't think there's anything here that specifically does that. But it is a concern. It's something I'll look at. We'll very quickly see how well it works. It won't take very long. It's a planning meeting on Wednesday, so we'll see very quickly how it goes. And I'm moving back to the planning committee myself, so we'll see firsthand. But it's an area that also we are in focus in. So the council, when we have a planning committee, if we're going to get public turn up, that's when they'll be there in numbers. And so that's when the spotlight is on us. So I want to see the planning committee able to do its job. And lastly, I will say sometimes the planning committee do go against the officer's recommendation. And whilst I'm sure we all remember the one case where that did go horribly wrong, there have been many, many dozens of cases where the planning committee have gone against. It's gone to appeal, and we've won. So many, and I can name a dozen. I can name several that I attended and spoke at, and I can name one where I was actually cross-examined for an hour and three quarters. So I welcome it broadly, but I'm A, worried that we're making the job so onerous that councillors won't want to do it, and I'm B, concerned that we're not predetermining, that's too far, but running the risk of being on the edge of predetermining, and I want the planning committee to be able to make its decisions without fear or favour. Yes.
Well, that was a filibustering moment, wasn't it?
Come this week, so I thought I'd sort of try and make
So
up
you
for it.
made up for it. Mr. Davidson.
Thank you. Where do I start? So, on the training issue, if somebody is going to be taking part in planning, having a half day or a day's training when the commitment to doing planning is, as you rightly say, is a day, shouldn't be an issue. And if it is, it probably means that it's going to be a struggle for them to be on planning. The planning committee, as you rightly have referred, is a quasi-judicial process, and therefore the training is so important, just as it would be with licensing, that people are very well aware of the statutory position of the advice and the guidance, etc. So I think that's a really important one. However, what I would say is that this is going to become much more of a focus with planning for training, as we've seen with the government announcement. So it's actually going to be certificated in the future. So the move from government is going to be much further in terms of the training requirements for planning going forward in the future. So just to sort of say, watch this space for that. Can I just say, and that's sort of what one is that the work of the Standards Committee and all those who have put into this and voiced concerns, and it is really valuable to do that at the Standards Committee. So a thank you to the work the Standards Committee have done on that one. In terms of reports and recommendations, well, all reports have recommendations, and that may whether it be contracts, whether that be the work before you. It is absolutely right, as Councillor Bray quite rightly says, that members then have the right to make a decision, so long as it's not illegal, to say actually going on a different direction to a recommendation. So I don't think it fetters the discussion in any way, and indeed it is the normal presumptive way of doing it as part of local government more generally, as you see in the reports here, as we see in the reports to council, etc., etc. And my last point in terms of responses to the report here, which is going forward to council. So this is a recommendation to council as part of the recommendation on page 31. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought I should just make a couple of comments with regard to Councillor Bray. His comments about it did go on, and I think I picked most of it up, but I didn't write anything down, which is possibly, so I may miss something. As you know, I've sat on planning. I've had this role for a little while. Some of this I don't think goes far enough, but I've put my comments into the consultation. They've been taken into consideration, and that's it. I personally think, and it is a personal view, that if you sit on planning and you have volunteered to sit on planning, because that's what it is, it's a voluntary role really, you don't just get put on it, although that has happened in the past, I seem to remember, to me. But there you go, is that you should look to try and upskill yourself. So the training is vital, because what we don't want to do is be making mistakes because we haven't partaken of the training. I don't see this as making a planning committee predetermined. We've had discussions in the past about recommendations, yes or no. I'm sure we'll have many more. My personal view is I want a recommendation from an officer to show everything's weighed up and what is the planning balance. They're our professional advisors. They've done all the training. They've done all the, they've got degrees for goodness sake and everything else. So, yeah, I'll leave that with that. I just think it's a good document. It's a document that we work to. With the respect and everything else, at times, I think that sometimes debate can be confrontational. And also, members of the public are allowed to turn up at site visits and bits and pieces. We have in the past had one instance That was very emotional. I won't bother telling you where it was because obviously we all know. But members of the public who attend site visits, they have to behave. We have a protocol to keep to. They must respect what we can and can't do. And I think this document outlines everything. And also, it's just a reminder as well to us as councillors that, you know, there are certain lines that we shouldn't step over. And I think it's all here. And if it needs another review, I mean, it depends on what government might come up with next, because, you know, they're looking at potentially planning committees will only be dealing with the big stuff, which will mean that those on planning those councillors that sit on planning will need to be properly trained and knowledgeable and learn. So that's just what I say. Thank you, Chairman.
Very much. I'm going to have my comments. I can see you want to come back. I'm a bit hesitant whether to let you back in because you promise. But one thing I would say was the inference of a lack of councillors wanting to be on the planning committee. Now, I have been here 10 years and I have done countless Widdicombe's with Mr. Ford, to the point where it was almost one a month in 1 year, I believe. And that was the very first Widdicombe where we struggled, from one group to find someone to go on planning. And if I remember correctly, it was your group that kindly took the place, or it wasn't forced upon you. But in my own group, I have people who I had to turn down because I've only got 2 seats. And, this was only a Widdicombe for a better part of a month, as we all agreed around the room, and then we would address it after that month. So I think you've been a little bit mischievous, shall we say, with that comment. So, but I'll let you come back.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you for allowing me to come back. I would say cautious rather than mischievous. If you see that there could be a problem, you should nip it before you get there. That's my standard practice. First of all, thank you for the comments from the Chief Executive, and I take on board all of those. They're absolutely right. And thank you also to Portfolio Holder. I agree. I think a lot of work has gone into this, and the vast majority of it is really good. Like Portfolio Holder, I think it could have gone a little bit further in some areas. I think the upskill, yes, we'd all try to upskill, and you can't help it actually. The more planning meetings you do, the more you upskill. You sort of do, you learn something new every time. So that happens anyway. It is voluntary, and yes, quite right, we did take on that seat, and we're quite lucky in that we have a number of councillors who actually find planning interesting. I'm sure there's a number who don't, so that it is quite good, but there is a concern there. As for the recommendations and whether officers should make a recommendation, I think there are cases where we have a balanced situation where perhaps it would be better if they didn't. And I think it's onerous on officers. And I said that in my first part. When you reach a point where an officer is saying, actually, I could recommend either way, forcing them to choose which way, I think is actually wrong for the officer as much as anything else. So I'll probably continue to argue that one for about 100 years, and I did say I'll keep it short, so I'll stop. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. It's been moved. It's been seconded. Are we in agreement? Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 8, and this is the Council's items, that's obviously me, delivering against the Council's corporate plan and the final proposal for highlight priorities for 25-26. So I've written a few words on this, and I'll start with I'm inviting Cabinet to approve the highlights set out for the highlight priorities set out from page 83 to 88. It commences with the new priority around devolution and local government reorganisation. I don't want to deflect the meeting to consider this subject, but it's a particularly relevant subject given the work across Greater Essex involving all councils and the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner. We also have the response proposal on devolution as item 12 on the coming agenda. While there is extensive work around devolution and local government, we must strive to press ahead with the corporate plan approved by Council. The remaining highlight priorities seek to deliver this as part of our contract with residents we serve. The needs of the area and the measures to address those needs are reflected in the highlight priorities. I also want to thank those members of the public who submitted views in the consultation we undertook to get to this point. The message around community engagement is not lost on us. One of our highlight priorities for 25-26 is to develop a new community engagement strategy, pages 87 D3. Hopefully, readers will see that we do listen to them. We also continue our reporting framework with these highlight priorities and placing these in the public domain as part of our commitment to openness. With these words, I move the recommendation on page 70 to consider the consultation outcome, to approve the highlight priorities, and specifically the new priority around devolution and local government reorganisation. Thank you very much. I've moved it. I need a seconder. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I would like to second the approval of this report, noting the importance of the consultation process whilst acknowledging the participation of those residents that responded. I would encourage more of our residents to take part in future consultations. The final highlight priorities in Appendix B are testimony to the importance of delivering the corporate plan. It is a pleasure for me as a portfolio holder to work with directors and officers that continually have such enthusiasm and professionalism in delivering our priorities for 2025-26. With regards to the inclusion of the plan for Greater Essex devolution and local government reorganisation, I welcome its inclusion into our priorities and have complete confidence in our leader and our chief executive in formulating plans that will be beneficial to all residents whilst taking into account the needs of the various communities within. Finally, I would like to acknowledge the hard work and dedication put into the plan thus far and offer any support that I may in the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I've been moved and seconded. Have we got any comments? No? Sorry. Mr. Davison.
Sorry, I did just want to sort of make a couple of comments about the point in time in which we are at the moment. So I think it's absolutely right that community leadership continues to run through all our priorities because we are community leaders in our area rather than it just being a council aspect. But LGR, as part of being one of the priorities, is about putting us in the best possible place. We've talked about this in council, we've talked about Councillor Chapman talked about it for staff the other evening, really important, and it being there. I think that we must recognise, though, that LGR is fast moving, and with that, when the statutory instrument order is placed, it could well be we'll need to look at this again and review where we are in terms of our priorities, because it is moving so fast that what we will be able to and required to do may change, and so we just need to be mindful of the impact that will have. The other thing which was announced last week was NHS England was being abolished, and the ICBs were having 50% reduction. As part of our priorities, a number of them are working with health. We will need to work through those as well and talk with our health partners. I've already been in contact with Ed Garrett to discuss any of those impacts. It's too early to tell, but again, that may affect our annual priorities, which we've just discussed. So I just want to kind of put a note of caution in there, is that these are the right thing to do, but we are a point in time rather than necessarily set in stone for the year as we know it.
Thank you, Mr. Davison, and I wholeheartedly agree with those sentiments because it is continually shifting. But Councillor Henderson, you wanted to come in.
Thank you. Yes, Leader. And the Chief Exec just highlighted one area which we'd see as pressure on the council, being devolution and LGR over the next few years. But I think as you look through these pages and look at the priorities and projects which are here for delivery for the future, and some of them we've already been working on, like the care line. I know we're all very pleased with the outcome of the care line consultation and decision making on that. So it just highlights some of the background of the work. And all of these priorities, and you turn over these pages and see headlines like continuing with tourism, you know, for the benefits of the district, and delivering the cultural strategies for the future for our district, the local plan which is going ahead. You look at all of that and all of the projects which you'll see on page 85, all the levelling up projects you're talking about, over £70 million of investments in there, and none of this can be done without a really good team behind you to deliver all of these projects on all of those pages. So I just, once again, we can't say it enough how much we appreciate the officers in support and help in delivering these essential projects. We always say as a cabinet, we want to get things done. We can't get those things done without those officers right behind us delivering those projects for us. And that's why we've had to bring in assistance for those officers. And we talk about the project delivery unit. It's doing a really good job, because one of the things we want to see as a cabinet is we have got these extra pressures, LGR and devolution, but we also want to see these projects delivered, which will bring benefits to residents and also to the visitors visiting our district over the next few years. So I welcome these priorities. I welcome all the work that's been done, and once again thank the officers for all their support. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Anybody else wish to speak? Well, I concur with everything you've just said, Councillor Henderson. I'm going to move the recommendation on page 70. It's been seconded by 8 Councillor Smith. Can I have an agreement, please? Thank you very much. And that takes us on to item number 9, and that's a report of the Corporate and Finance Government Portfolio Holder, the timetable of meetings. So in front of you is the timetable of meetings, but there has been an amendment put on the table today, and I've got a bit of a sort of preamble to read out to explain why we have an amendment on the table in front of us. So, in presenting this report, I would like to draw Cabinet's attention to 2 matters which will require me to amend recommendations instead of those printed on page 89 of the agenda. Those amended recommendations were circulated to us and the group leaders prior to the meeting commencing. The first matter concerns the Planning Policy and Local Plan Committee and its meeting dates in 2025. Paul Woods, the Council's Planning Policy Team Leader, has been liaising with the Chairman of the Planning Policy and Local Plan Committee, Councillor Carlo Guglielmi, to agree some dates for meetings of that committee during 2025 to progress the review of TDC's local plan. It is proposed that the Planning Policy and Local Plan Committee will meet during 2025 on the following dates. And that's the Wednesday 28th of May, Monday the 21st of July, Monday the 8th of September, and Monday the 8th of December. I am therefore suggesting that those dates should be accommodated within the timetable of meetings for 25-26. That goes forward to the annual meeting of the full council. The second matter concerns the submission of the Detailed Local Government Reorganisation, or LGR, proposals to government. As was mentioned to members at full council last Tuesday, the deadline for the submission by Essex councils of the final LGR proposal for Greater Essex is 26th of September 2025. In order to meet this deadline, it is quite likely that extra meetings of Cabinet and or full council, and possibly other bodies outside of those in the scheduled timetable, will be required in order for this council to make its decisions regarding the final proposal on LGR prior to September's deadline. It is too early to be able to fix any dates for such extra meetings, but I feel that Cabinet is making its decision on this matter today should acknowledge that such extra meetings are likely to be needed later this year. So I therefore move the recommendation on the table, and I'm not going to read it because I've pretty much just done that. So it's been moved. I need a seconder, please.
I'll second that, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Henderson. Any comments?
This will be much shorter. I think the meeting schedule looks nice and straightforward. The amendment that you put in, I think, was absolutely necessary. It looks quite likely that the LGR is going to dominate most things for some time to come, and I think it's obvious that we're going to need additional and extra meetings to make decisions, probably sometimes at short notice. I think everybody's aware of that, but it's a good idea to highlight it. So yeah, 100% support that. We'll be fine with that. Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments? Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Can I have an agreement, please? Thank you very much. And that moves me on to item number 10. He says, okay. Number 10 is the report of the Cabinet Finance and Governance Portfolio Holder, the annual review of the Council's Constitution. This was set up quite some time ago, and each year the council's representatives from each party come together to discuss any particular issues that they have with the constitution. Now, it's quite a lengthy list. I'm not prepared to read out all the edits and everything else, but it was a really good meeting. I think we covered a lot of work. Councillor Chapman and Councillor Cotts were there, also giving their thoughts on the proposed amendments. It's been put forward, so I'm just looking for a seconder, please.
I'm happy to second that, Chair, and it was a very interesting meeting. I think there was a general consensus around that meeting in terms of the amendments which are being made to Constitution, and I think it's a good piece of work, and I'm happy to second the recommendations within the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cotts. Were there any comments or questions? Okay, in that case, it's been moved and seconded. Can I have an agreement, please? Thank you very much. So number 11 is report of the Corporate Finance and Governance Portfolio Holder. I do apologise for it being the Mark Stevenson show, but we've got a few of these today. The Finance Performance Report 24-25, general update at the end of December 24-25. And as per usual, I have some words that I put together. I thought our recent budget meeting at full council back in February went well. It was good to receive some robust challenges and questions from a number of members. As I've said before, we will always be open and honest about everything we do, and I will tell it as it is. And along with the questions raised at full council or directly at these cabinet meetings, I personally think we operate in a healthy environment where we can have good discussions and debate. At the end of the day, we're all trying to do the best for our great district. With the above in mind, I can present today a full detailed financial performance report that builds on previous discussions. We have done a lot of good financial housekeeping this year, both within the regular financial reports and via the detailed estimates that we recently agreed at full council. It is good to say that we are currently no major financial surprises, and although subject to the comprehensive end-of-year close-down processes that will get underway shortly, we still expect to manage our finances within our overall net budget position. We will therefore be able to continue to balance the books and not to have to call down any money from general reserves, which I'm sure many councillors will have to do this year, given the ongoing challenges the sector faces. In picking up some topics from previous conversations, we are planning to consider a report at our next meeting in respect of our options for the Wheatley Council site, the council offices site. We should also have a report to an upcoming meeting to help us explore and address the ongoing challenges of homelessness within the district. Alongside homelessness, we are acknowledging the risks posed by the national insurance increase coming in April and the outcome from the waste contract tender. We plan on considering a report in respect to the review and outcomes of the Sunspot scheme in Jaywick as early as possible in 2025-26. In addition to our wider budget, there are all things that we need to keep under review during 2025-26 and as part of developing our long-term forecast. As previously discussed, we also have some wider changes in the shape of the government's upcoming spending review and future local government finance settlements, which run us alongside the devolution and local government reorganisation agenda. As highlighted within the report we considered at full council on Tuesday night, we are seeking support from the government, not only in terms of direct financial assistance, but also in the form of recognising the need for a relatively stable funding environment during the associated transition period. Although we have some significant challenges ahead, we continue to have some flexibility in terms of the forecast risk fund, our corporate investment fund that we are proposing to create to increase as set out within the report, and with other one-off monies we currently hold. As always, the next few years are a bit of a financial jigsaw puzzle, but a challenge we need to continue to be ready for. Along with any support we can extract from the government, we should be able to get ourselves successfully through the next few years and be ready for whatever local government reorganisation delivers across Essex. As always, I welcome the views and input from the Resource and Overview and Scrutiny Committee following their reviews of the forecast and budgets at their upcoming meetings. Thank you very much. So that's my thoughts captured on black and white, and I'm going to look for a seconder. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Barry. Sorry, Councillor. It's Councillor Barry.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm happy to second this report and the recommendations contained therein. It's always good to hear that we're expecting to be able to manage any adverse issues within our overall net budget position without calling money from reserves. And I think I'd just like to, commend the work that our staff have done throughout the year and our capacity and in managing our capacity to respond robustly and in a timely fashion to the many issues that arise. In terms of emerging issues, I think there are a few highlighted within this report and that they are going to be taken into account within the budget planning for 2025-2026. And so we obviously need to remain alert to the financial challenges ahead. And I think we've got to, keep acknowledging the ever growing and changing financial landscape around LGR. But by continuing to do the right things, I think we should be able to maintain a stable financial position for this authority going into those, long-lasting and difficult negotiations to come. So I'd like to commend the report and the recommendations therein.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. So it's been moved and seconded. I'll throw the floor open to questions and comments. Any questions or comments? No? Okay. Right, in that case, I shall move. I've moved, seconded. Can I have an agreement, please? Thank you very much. Number 12, and finally, it's not me. This is a report from the Economic Growth and Regeneration Tourism Portfolio Holder, Essex Devolution Consultation. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Leader. As we all know, the government has accepted Greater Essex onto the Devolution Priority Programme. Devolution describes the process of setting up a mayoral combined county authority with powers over transport, economic development, strategic planning, skills, health and well-being, the environment and community safety. The mayoral combined county authority would be a new body that does not replace any of the existing councils. Government is consulting on the proposal to set up the new authority early in 2026, with 3 members nominated from Essex County Council and 2 members each from Southend and Thurrock councils. These members would be joined by a new mayor due to be elected from across Greater Essex on May 2026. The Greater Essex Mayoral Combined County Authority will continue to exist if local government reorganisation is enacted, with the council members on the combined authority nominated from the new unitary councils. As a district, Tendra District Council cannot be a full constituent member of the combined county authority, but it can participate as a non-constituent member and serve on committees. Before taking a decision on whether to proceed to make the necessary legislation to form the new mayoral combined county authority, the government has launched a consultation seeking views. The consultation is open until the 13th of April this year, 2025. The council is supportive of setting up the new authority, which will give new powers to Greater Essex to deliver for local people and create a strong voice into central government. We would like to see the district council put in the strongest position possible in relation to the new combined authority. The report recommends endorsing that the leader, in consultation with me as the portfolio holder for economic growth, regeneration and tourism, approves the council's response to the consultation. Leader, I therefore move the recommendations on page 191.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and it comes as no surprise that I'm happy to second that. The recommendations are well thought out. I'm very happy with the consultation, and I'm going to happily go to the floor and ask if there are any comments or questions. Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Henderson. It's been seconded by myself. Are we in agreement? Thank you very much. So the next item is item number 13, which is report of the Economic Growth and Tourism Community Regeneration Partnership Programme update and further waiver projects. I believe this one's yours, Councillor Henson.
Thank you. And if members go back to one of our previous decisions on priorities, they'll see this is a big part of those going forward. And it's a really good news story. In December 2024, the Cabinet accepted 19.3 million of Community Regeneration Partnership funding from the Government to deliver regeneration in Clacton and Jaywick Sands. The programme funds 15 projects which will collectively make a huge difference to the town. The projects form part of a wider regeneration programme, including the Levelling Up Fund at Carnarvon Terrace and Plan for Neighbourhoods, providing 20 million over 10 years. The latest report sets out 6 of the Community Regeneration Partnerships projects for approval by the Cabinet, totalling 12.25 million. This includes refurbishing Martello Tower E to bring it back into use, delivering improvements to the public spaces in Jaywick Sands, delivering a new all-wheel cycling facility at Clacton Leisure Centre and completing urgent repairs to the building, developing a new spatial plan for Clacton to drive regeneration by supporting culture, exploring the acquisition of a building in Clacton Town Centre for community and cultural uses, installing solar panels to the sunspot to cut running costs and provide further support to our local enterprises. The report recommends setting up a corporate delivery board to oversee project development and delivery. The board will support project management, best practice across fund and programmes. With this oversight in place, projects will only be referred back to the Cabinet if the project scope changes or there are risks to delivering the Memorandum of Understanding with the Government. This report demonstrates how, as a council, we remain committed to delivering bold and ambitious projects in the district. And I think one of the points that this is making from those last paragraph I made, it's really important, I think, as a council, we've learnt from possible mistakes in the past that we don't expose ourselves as a council to any things that are unexpected in the future. And that's why we've got all of these mechanisms in place to make sure that we have that support network round us, so that exposure doesn't possibly hit us without any expectation. So with that, Leader, I'm pleased to move the recommendation on pages, and it's a big recommendation, on pages 202 to start, 203, and goes on to 204. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henson. That sounds absolutely wonderful. Can I ask who's your seconder, please? Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Leader. I would like to second this report. These community regeneration partnership projects will provide an excellent package of investments into Clacton and Jaywick. I would like to highlight the new opportunities for cultural organisations as a result of the projects. With the Martello Tower refurbished and the feasibility study established future tenants, including cultural organisations, and visioning work to support establishing the necessary partnerships, actions and capacity needed for cultural quarter here in Clacton. So I so move, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. It's been moved and seconded. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to add? Comments? Nope. Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Henson and seconded by Councillor Scott. Are we all in agreement? Agreed. Thank you very much. And our last item on the agenda today is the report of the Head of Democratic Service and Election, the petition to save citizens' advice tendering. So it's a management team item. I believe Mr. Mays, I think you're aware of the protocol. Please take a seat and talk to your petition, please. I'm hoping it's not going to be too long, but I won't hold you to. No. Middle button.
That one there, right. Is that on, is it? Yes, yeah, okay. Thank you, Leader, Deputy Leader and Cabinet for inviting me to speak today as I present this petition on behalf of the people tendering, asking for this council to save citizens' advice tendering by reinstating on a secure and sustainable basis its core funding of at least £144,000 and of course the mental health hub funding of £28,000. TDC have funded CA tendering for 13 years. Through loss of this funding, CA tendering is now at risk of closure. I've been informed by CA tendering that one of their main concerns is that whilst on page 230, it states that to ensure there's no gap in provision, obviously the extension funding will continue. CA tendering will have legal liability in regards to a redundancy process if it is facing closure, which means that you know, the service could close before the 1st of October date that the council hopes to obviously introduce a new or current service, and therefore that gap could obviously be still quite present. So Citizens Advice is a recognised and trusted brand and has been a national treasure and lifeline for generations of families and people in need for over 85 years. CA tendering's core funding costs tendering taxpayers less than £1 per person per year, based on obviously that core funding of 144,000, which many people we've spoken to and who signed the petition state that that's obviously extremely good value for money. For this pound, local people know they can access an advice service near to their home that is free, confidential, impartial and independent, is a service that will not judge them on whatever they need to seek advice on, and they trust Citizens Advice tendering to be there for them when times are hard. This council has to date been extremely transparent on why it continues to justify funding CA tendering through the subsidy scheme. And I know that transparency is obviously one of the main sort of reasons for doing the procurement service. You have stated that CA tendering is value for money and, quote, it is unlikely that TDC could offer the same level of service for less costs. You have publicly praised CA tendering for being a trusted and recognised advice service, and there would be implications if the council were to cease funding. Excuse me. Finally, this council has stated that its own workforce does not possess the knowledge required to advise on certain advice areas. Of course, Citizens Advice tendering has been complementing this skill set. It is reassuring that Council agrees that CA tendering is worthy of its funding from TDC, with a highly skilled and knowledgeable workforce, both paid and voluntary, to deliver such a service. Over 13 years, CA tendering and TDC have shared a professional working relationship in making the district a better place for the good of all, which of course is the Council's motto. This leads me therefore to ask one question. Why does TDC feel the need to reinvent the wheel in relation to funding an advice service? This undoubtedly comes at a cost to the public purse, including taxpayer-funded offers of time, completing arguably unnecessary work trying to fix something that isn't broke, as well as funding the communications message and promotion activities outlined in your reports that will of course need to follow if a new service provider was to be awarded the core funding for running that advice service. On this basis today, we ask the following resolutions from Cabinet. The core funding of at least £144,000 to be reinstated through either the current Health Inequalities Subsidy Scheme or via a suitable alternative route that offers secure and sustainable funding annually, as opposed to bidding or procurement requirements being necessary. And number two, this petition goes to the full council for debate on March the 25th, so that obviously backbench councillors and obviously the full representation of TDC can obviously have their say on obviously this subject. So thanks very much, Leader, for listening to that, and obviously I'll conclude.
Thank you, Mr. Mays, for that passionate speech. Thank you. So, right, it's our job to consider this, and I will happily move our response to it. So one of the first things I would say is that we did recognise the gap to residents, which is why we continue to fund it by another £72,000 in a previous cabinet meeting. And it's not a criticism of citizens' advice tendering. It's far from it. As you said, you do some great work. But procurement is the proper way. And the reason why I say that is because we're not reinventing the wheel, as you put it. These are new government rules, and by new, I say the previous administration, government, put these into place, and they're the rules that we now have to follow and put in place. Now, some people have got different views on those rules, but it's our interpretation of the rules as we're going forward. And we have a lot of great voluntary sector providers, and it's only fair that they all get the opportunity to bid for this important work of supporting residents. We also want to give, to make sure that those that are best placed to give that support. So in doing so, I wanted to read, unfortunately Councillor Placey wasn't able to be here today, and so I'll read her comments straight from the agenda. And she says, I believe passionately in the importance of advice and information to enable residents to make the best decisions and navigate the systems that provide financial and other support. That is why the Council's extended the funding to citizens' advice tendering for 6 months to ensure that there is no gap in provision, and why we want to go through a process to test the best value provision of advice in the district. Having considered the petition and reviewed the assessment and advice set out in this report, I believe the right approach is to test what is the best organisation to provide advice in tendering through the procurement processes as we set out in the January 2025 report to Cabinet. So, those are my comments. I do need a seconder. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Barry.
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and thank you, Mr. Mazes, for bringing this to our attention and speaking so well on the issues. I just support what the Leader has said, but also just raise the point that the reason we're doing this are there are procurement rules that have changed, but also the fact that you mentioned this funding has been going on for 13 years, and I'm sure that everyone and you personally would recognise that the advisory landscape has significantly changed in those 13 years, and that there are issues now that affect our residents that were probably not as impactful 10, 12 years ago. So we have to respond to the changing landscape, and as the Leader has said, we have to look at the most appropriate service level provision, and as part of that approach, we have to be fair to all our, we've got some wonderful voluntary organisations and some quite specialist ones, and I'm thinking particularly around issues such as housing, and we have to give them all the opportunity to put their case to deliver the best service to our residents. And I don't think in doing that there is any implied criticism or negativity around citizens' advice tendering, who we all acknowledge do a fantastic job, and they're clearly on the level playing field. They can make the same applications as any other organisation and will be considered on their merits. So I think we've taken the option of extending the funding for 6 months to allow them to make a full and proper representation to the council to carry on their good work, and we will consider that along with all the others. So I'm happy to support this and take on board what the Leader has said, but also thank you very much for your time and efforts in bringing this to our attention.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. Mr. Davidson.
Thank you. Can I just just for clarification, give in terms of what you're moving and seconding? So you've noted the approval, as in at the bottom of 230, noted the approval from the Cabinet for the allocation of 72,000 citizens' advice tender to continue to contribute. But bear in mind this is a recommendation going to council or council. The comment, as it says, per the recommendation comments, the first paragraph in italics on page 230 is the comment, and then the second paragraph in italics of 230 is the recommendation forward about having considered the petition and reviewed the assessment advice set out in this report. That is there. So you've got the noting, and you've got then the comments as per the requirement in the recommendation on 226. To the Cabinet decides what views, comments, or recommendation it wishes to incorporate. So it's bottom of 230 and the 2 paragraphs in italics.
been moved, seconded. Did anybody want to talk on it? Councillor Bray.
Thank you, Leader. You'd have been disappointed if I didn't. So just some very simple observations. Firstly, it's been said that they have a great deal of expertise and knowledge at our Citizens Advice Bureau. We're very aware of their capabilities and what they're capable of doing. And more importantly, can I just ask that when we're going through the procurement process, we also take into account the fact that if they were to be replaced, that would require a rebranding, which would require a substantial amount of promotion to ensure people knew what the new service was, which of course would not be the case with the existing service. So that will be a difference in cost, I suspect. I'll be corrected if it's not.
Sorry, that would depend on who was to win, because, for example, we have other organisations who do have, so for example, CVST, they have a brand here, Peabody's, they have a brand here, so it would depend on, but I think whoever goes forward, we would be wanting, whether if CAT are the winners of it, they would want to be very clear about what they're delivering, etc. And I've spoken many times to different colleagues there and their previous chief executives. So I think this is a really good opportunity, whoever wins it, to be really sort of setting out their stall and what they're delivering for us. So I'm not sure that necessarily it would be any one which would be an increase in cost, just to clarify, because it would be the outcome of the process.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. You're absolutely right. But of course, everybody knows what CAB is. The whole world knows what CAB is. So if it changed its name in any way, shape or form, it might need more promotion than otherwise. I don't know, but it's a possibility and might be wanted to be taken into account. Thank you.
Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. I don't think there's any councillor around here who's been around for quite a while and knows what excellent support there is out there, not just from CAT, but lots of all the other groups. I know from my ward and my area. I don't know where we'd be without some of the voluntary groups, and also some of the voluntary groups. I'd say they're professional, but the professional groups which are offering professional advice. It was just mentioned about Peabody, and I just want to give this as an example of this not being an unusual situation. Tomorrow, I'll be sitting where you are, Councillor Bray, in opposition leader at Essex County Council, and they are re-tendering an actual service that Peabody is actually now responsible for a 5-year new tender contract. That contract finishes in March 2026, and they're launching the tender the 1st of April this year. And they're doing advice on us called floating support services, and that's to help people and prevention, early intervention prevention for homelessness, evictions from housing. So it's not the message we need to go out there. This is not unusual, and the leaders already said they are requirements that we have to do as councils, and I've just given you a really good example about exactly the same sort of issue is going to be addressed tomorrow. Peabody could be, and they probably are, and I've seen some of the outcomes on the report which we'll be looking at tomorrow. They do an absolutely fantastic job, but the requirement is that that has to go out for tender, and it has to be looked at, and other people have to be given the opportunity to offer those services. Now, it might be the same people get those services because we know they're doing an excellent job, but we'll just have to wait and see what the outcome is. But I just want to add that, just so people have clarification. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hinton. I see a couple of people in the audience who want to have a conversation. No, I'm sorry, I can take it offline, outside of the meeting. And if you wanted to feed it back to Councillor, listen to me, Mr. Mays, you will get another opportunity at full council. So unfortunately, I'm going to round the debate out. So it's been moved. It's been seconded. To have an agreement to the response that, having considered the petition and reviewed the assessment and advice set out in the report, I believe the right approach is to test what is the best organisation to provide advice in tendering through the procurement process as set out in the January 2025 report to Cabinet.
And Chairman, to note the bottom paragraph of 230 around the 72,000 as well.
And to, okay. And to note the bottom paragraph. Sorry, can I explain that?
Yeah. The 72,000, this one. Yep.
Sorry, could you explain?
Yeah, and also to note the approval from the Cabinet, previous approval from the Cabinet
Okay.
of 72,000.
And so we're also going to note number 2, sought the approval of the Cabinet for the allocation of 72 million, 72 million, lovely, 72,000 to Citizens Advice Tendering to continue to contribute to the existing information and advice given service through direct funding for the interim period up to the 30th of September 2025 in accordance with a subsidy scheme. Now can I have agreement, please, Chair? Thank you. And that was the last item, so I hereby close the meeting. Thank you very much.